Dave is trying really hard to concentrate after he had received his sack letter on Thursday morning. This really messed up his plans for the big weekend with his friends at the club on Friday and his usual Saturday night out with the random date. Dave was so upset with Clara for having given him his sack letter in the presence of his colleagues at work. Dave felt so humiliated for the approach after his 7 years of dedicated and innovative input into the company. Dave was executive staff at the GMC Entertainment Holdings and a brainiac with extraordinary innovative ideas, so he doubted he was sacked because he was caught using some high-stimulant drugs, which was against the company's policy. Dave felt like Clara could have handled the situation more maturely, considering he was a big deal to the company. He pondered the issue all day and he was convinced that Clara had only taken that action to get back at him because he had frequently turned down her love escapade requests. Dave spent all day watching the Discovery Channel, thinking, eating, and sleeping. By 9:55 p.m., he felt the urge to go out despite his awful situation. He thought going out with his friends at the club would help him feel better. Dave stepped into the bathroom and turned on the shower, but then immediately switched it off and went back to his room as he was just in his feelings. Dave put on his favorite hoodie and took an Uber to the club. As the driver drove along the route, Dave was completely lost in his thoughts. It wasn't until the Uber driver gently tapped him to inform him he had reached his destination that Dave woke up out of it. He paid the driver and eagerly stepped into the club. He was hailed by many people as he went in, as Dave was a popular narcissist at the Cambo Club. He saw his friends hadn't arrived yet, so he sat alone at their usual spot in the club. It was a VIP section. He was quickly served several alcoholic drinks upon his demand. So within 30 minutes, he was already drunk to a stupor. The noise was making it unbearable for Dave at the club, so he stepped out. He saw his friends at the entrance of the Cambo Club who were about to have their usual Friday night bang. When asked where he was headed, Dave drunkenly replied, "I'm coming back." His friends noticed he was very drunk but laughed it out as they didn't sense any issue with him. He kept walking far away from the club till he got to the intersection of the road connecting to the highway. He breathed heavily like he was relieved of something. Dave saw two people at the bus stand waiting for the last bus of the day. He approached the bus stand where these two people, a middle-aged woman and a young guy, were sitting. He thought they were some factory workers coming back from work. Dave got his phone out from his hoodie and saw the time was 11:45. He sighed and said, "I need to be home." He scrolled through his phone aimlessly. A thought of Clara flashed back to him, and he was suddenly filled with a rush of anger. The other young guy waiting for the bus was very somber and looked downtrodden. He had lost his fortune, which he invested in some crypto coins. The bus seemed like it was taking forever, finally arrived at the bus stand where Dave and the others were about to get on board. When he noticed the face of the middle-aged woman looked like someone he knew, but he couldn't quite figure it out. The bus was otherwise empty. Dave sat in the last seat of the bus while the middle-aged woman sat in the fourth row next to the window, and the young guy sat behind the driver. The bus was silent as the driver headed for their destination. The bus had a flashing light which went out almost every second. Something feels odd about the bus, but no one paid attention to it, as the middle-aged woman was lost in the TikTok she was watching on her phone. The young guy was following up with the crypto chart on his phone, and Dave was lost in his thoughts as his anger just pulsated through him. The driver noticed how silent the bus was, so he switched on the radio on the bus. A mid-tempo song came on. He loved it and felt the passengers on board would love it too. The middle-aged woman on board started singing the song word for word. Something strange occurred next. This time, the flinching of the bus light lasted for a minute, then the usual seconds. Immediately, the bus went dark. A sound of footsteps could be heard as the song on the radio had ended. And the next song intro was still in its low pitch, making the footsteps obvious. The light in the bus came back on after a minute. Something bizarre had happened. The middle-aged woman was lying lifeless on the floor in her pool of blood. No one noticed what had happened to this woman as she was laying there in her own blood. Mike, the young guy who was sober because he had lost his fortune in crypto, was still following up with the crypto chart and was watching prediction videos about the next big crypto coin. Dave had his head resting on the window, admiring the night view of the city. The bus driver, however, noticed something was odd. Remembering how he had initially picked up 3 people at the bus stand, he was only seeing 2 passengers through the rearview mirror. As he was driving, he kept trying to find the other passenger on the bus. He felt a little disturbed, but he didn't know what to do. He stopped at the red light at the intersection. The bus driver got up to check where the woman was sitting before the traffic light gave the green light. Upon turning around and beginning to walk back, he couldn't believe what he had seen. The woman who he had been searching for through the rearview mirror was lying on the floor, lifeless, in her pool of blood. He looked at the other 2 passengers on board, but noticed they weren't looking in his direction. It was a green light, so the driver had to continue with the trip and also decide what to do next. Outside the bus, he noticed 2 policemen standing next to their patrol car. He decided to try to get them to notice so they could see what had happened on the bus and get things under control before it escalated beyond his power. The driver kept on flashing the headlights of the bus as he slowly approached the policeman. The policeman noticed the flashing light and, feeling something odd, they decided to stop the bus. So they gave a signal to the driver to park the bus behind their patrol car. The bus driver, feeling relieved, obliged the instruction. This time the passengers in the bus noticed the policeman and were bothered about why he had stopped their bus. The young guy who sat behind the driver turned back to look at the other passengers to see their reactions, but he only saw Dave, who was sitting calmly. The woman was nowhere to be seen. The bus driver unlocked the door and the policeman stepped inside to look at everyone. They were shocked to see the lifeless body of the middle-aged woman lying on the floor. The reaction of the policeman made the young crypto guy look in the direction where they were staring. By this time, Dave was standing on his feet, and one of the policemen instructed everyone inside the bus to stay sitting without moving. The other policeman put in a distress call to their station, informing them what had happened. The policemen began to capture everything on the crime scene, including the passengers on board and where they were seated. The police backup team arrived within 3 minutes, and the passengers, including the driver, were taken to the police station. Each of them on the crime scene were asked to narrate how the incident occurred. The statements of the crypto guy and the driver were very similar, but the statement that Dave gave was completely different from what the other 2 had said. The prosecutor in charge of the case then began conducting some background checks on Dave, the crypto guy, and the driver. They all came out clean on the prosecutor's side, but the story that Dave had told was not adding up. While the investigation continued, they noticed a strange chat on Dave's phone which they had confiscated, which he had sent to his friend. While the investigation was broadening, they had taken their phones. They had noticed a strange chat on Dave's phone, which he had sent to his friend. He had deleted some of the chat, but the last text he received informed him to stay calm no matter what happens. He was interrogated on what the previous conversation was, but he told the investigators the text was a sequel to the sack letter he had received and nothing more. The investigating team on the case were not satisfied with the response, so they requested his service provider to share the details of the previous chat, as the person Dave was texting wouldn't answer his phone when he received a call from the investigators. Dave's service provider sent in the documents of the previous conversation the following day, and the context of the text revealed he was communicating with someone on the other end about what he had done. Upon further investigation and interrogation, Dave was found guilty of killing the woman, and his motives were simply because he could see the face of Clara in the middle-aged woman as he got on board the bus, and while on the bus, he contemplated on how to deal with her. He claimed his actions were completely under the influence of alcohol, and he reached out to one of his friends once he realized what he had done. Dave was eventually sentenced to life in prison for killing Jessie, who was a single mom with a daughter. What do you think of Dave and his actions? Let me know in the comment section.
Three friends, while on vacation in Romania, decided to go camping on a Tuesday morning. After hiring a tour guide, he advised that the best location was at a tree-dense forest in Hoya. The trip from their hotel to the forest was approximately 12 hours, and it would be nighttime on their arrival. "What are you scared of, the dark? I thought it was supposed to be a camping trip," Tony said in a mocking tone.
"I'm just worried because, besides the time it will take for us to get there, the forest itself doesn't even have a name on the map,"
the Marceline said. "Don't worry, ladies, you've got me, so you're safe. And also, if we notice anything wrong with the forest, we'll leave immediately," the tour guide said. With that, the three friends packed up their camping gear and made their way to Hoya. Upon their arrival, the night owls could already be heard, but to their response, the entrance of the forest was blocked by two armed men wearing glasses. The friends asked if they could get through, but the men simply shook their heads and gestured at them, suggesting they back off. The tour guide smiled, came out of the car and brought out some money from his pocket. "Come on, you know you want to." The guard said nothing, but after making a brief phone call, the second guard smiled at the tourist, took the money from his hand, and opened the gates for them. "Welcome," he said with a sharp grin on his face. Nervously, they made their way into the forest, but got to a dead end. Only that it wasn't a dead end, it was just a fenced area. Not even the tour guide knew about it, and out of curiosity, they got out of the car and made their way across the fence. But their first observation was the ice-cold feeling the moment their feet touched the ground. And their second observation was a structure that looked more like an ancient temple. Marceline, out of fear, insisted that she stay outside while her friends and the tour guide went inside the structure. But just after 5 minutes after their entry, Marceline heard screams from their friends within the structure. Thinking they were hurt, the girl ran towards the entrance, but before she got there, she saw the upper part of Tony's body violently thrown at the structure, but met her end the moment she looked inside. Welcome everyone, I'm Detective Nicolette, and the footage you just saw is a mere representation of SCP-2191, which also goes by the name Dracula Factory. The subject initially belonged to the Euclid class, but it was later changed to the Keter class because of its nature. I will get more on that later. Currently, this site is kept under 24-hour surveillance by the SCP Foundation, but with strict orders not to interfere with any of the ritual practices by the subject or the entities within the vicinity of the Hoya Forest. The Foundation staff are also prohibited from exploring the content of SCP-2191 in person, except for the use of a remote-controlled drone. Foundation operatives are also advised to maintain the facade of forest rangers who are under the employment of the Romanian government, although in the event of a security breach either by civilians or hostile entities, the use of lethal force is authorized. The subject itself is a temple-like complex located in the dense Hoya forest of Romania, as I earlier said. The first 2 floors of the complex shares a striking resemblance to an Eastern Orthodox monastery, which is naive to the region. Possible reason for this look might be as a way to disguise the true nature of SCP-2191. Both Thracian and Dacian architecture were spotted in the lower levels of the temple, while artifacts belonging to Cutrinoline Tripinoline culture were recovered from the lower tunnels of SCP-2191. The subject itself looks like an old structure, much so that the Foundation researchers insisted that caverns within the subject were not naturally formed but artificially constructed at an unknown time. Through carbon dating, concluded this time to be somewhere between 4800 to 3200 BC. Bear in mind, regardless of the name Dracula Factory, the subject and forest do not share any close resemblance to well-known Castlevania, although considering the nature of the entities, you can almost say it's like the village from Resident Evil 8 or Castle from 4, but that's definitely a long stretch. Speaking of entities, SCP-2191 is inhabited by a vast population of organisms, which the Foundation tagged SCP-2191-1. These humanoid instances are genetically considered to be humans, but seem to have undergone quite a lot of significant changes from mutation. They all lack major internal organs besides the lungs, heart, and brainstem. The outer epidermis of their skin lacks pigmentation, which gives them a gray-like color. A similar comparison will be the Harlequin syndrome. These entities also appear androgynous in nature, lacking secondary sexual organs or somehow had it removed. Their regressed eyes appear covered by a thick layer of skin which renders them mostly blind but still able to react to light rays from the sun or an artificial source. The remaining deviations from the genetic makeup that makes them human includes the funnel-shaped ears and a flat, unturned nose, with both considered to be dependent on an olfactory and auditory perception. They also do not communicate in words, but rather use some sort of echolocation through their clicking of their tongue. Results from further analysis show that they have a relatively slow metabolism, and although this doesn't make them immortal, it does explain their rather slow aging system. So, how did these instances come about? Well, although the Foundation didn't confirm it, I do believe humans transformed to SCP-2191-1 instances via the involvement of another entity, which the Foundation tagged SCP-2191-2. The title itself was given to 3 collections of veriform organisms, which all have different effects on SCP-2191-1. Considering the fact that all 3 vary in size, form, and purpose, they were all classified as SCP-2191-2A, SCP SCP-2191-2B and SCP-2191-2C. Results from genetic analysis of SCP-2191-2 suggest that it shares a close relation to that of a human. Foundation researchers also speculated that these entities do not naturally evolve on their own. However, their real origin still remains unknown. Talking about the classes, SCP-2191-2A superficially resembles lamprey, with its internal structure sharing a close resemblance to that of a regular leech. These entities are located in the abdomen region of every SCP-2191-1 instance, replacing the stomach and both the small and large intestines. SCP-2191-2B, on the other hand, appears as an infestation of vermiform organisms, which occupies the hollow walls of SCP-2191. It would also appear that the structure of Dracula's Factory was built in such a way that SCP-2191-2B could travel with ease. Perhaps its initial purpose was for water or sewage transportation before the structure took its current form. Although, while the previous class takes refuge in digestive parts of SCP-2191-1, this organism enters the host through its orifices, where it remains until its work is complete. Oddly enough, this strange practice doesn't appear to cause any discomfort with the host, nor does the job it is performing. Documents from SCP researchers believe that these little creatures collect nutrients from recently fed SCP-2191-1 instances and distribute them throughout SCP-2191, while the final class, SCP-2191-2C, comes off as tendril-like appendages that inhibit the interior structures of SCP-2191. These appendages consist primarily of neurons, and they are attached to SCP-2191-1 at the base of its spine whenever the instances are inactive. And strangely enough, it is only when these instances are connected to 2191-2C that they exhibit sapient properties like sitting or posturing as though it is prey. During an active state, SCP-2191-1 entities leave Dracula's Factory to hunt for living humans, ignoring both non-human animals and human corpses fresh or decayed. A noticeable behavior in their hunt is the fact that they do not hunt during the day, nor do they hunt in packs. To cover more ground, they choose to spread themselves throughout the forest. On sighting a prey, a paralytic agent, which is injected via venom delivery bulbs in the lower carpals of both hands, is used to disable the individual. Once the prey has been incapacitated, SCP-2191-1 starts by opening its mouth and widening its throat for an SCP-2191-2A entity to emerge from its interior cavity. The organism first leases to the victim with its toothed, funnel-like mouth before injecting the victim with its digestive enzymes. These enzymes liquidate the muscles, internal organs, and bones before sucking can commence. The entire feeding process can last up to 20 to 50 minutes depending on the size of the prey. Despite the SCP-2191 structure being in existence for centuries, the SCP Foundation never had knowledge of its anomalous activities. As a matter of fact, the Foundation only got to know of its existence in August 1916 after 244 members of the Austria-Hungarian First Army mysteriously disappeared without a trace during the battle for Transylvania. But due to the First World War still in progress, the SCP Foundation couldn't at the time carry out any real investigation, up until several incidents between 1932 and 1977 were recorded. In turn, led to the discovery of an even greater threat. These incidents, which happened in Greece, Turkey, Romania, and Macedonia, all had similar reports: earthquakes, pale men, tendril-like appendages, and vampiric attacks. However, the SCP Foundation still wasn't getting clear information about the attacks until the incident of March 4th, 1977, which resulted in the deaths of over 1,500 people in Romania. While their investigation, they discovered the real source of all the attacks. It was in fact a sapient being located deep beneath SCP-2191. This goes by the name SCP-2191-3, and its true size has, till this day, proven difficult for the Foundation to measure. But they did manage to track root-like appendages extending an area of up to 660,000 square kilometers. The creature is also the source of multiple underground tunnels in the area, and it is the being that controls both the SCP-2191-1 and SCP-2191-2 instances. The Foundation also found out that the natives of isolated villages within the Hoya Forest constantly provided human sacrifices to this entity as a means to not only minimize the seismic activities, but also as a means of worship to what they call their queen. I would have loved to do a personal investigation, at least to see how these three entities look like head-on, but doing that would mean I'd have to sneak past Foundation guards at night, since all my attempts at sending aerial drones have failed so far. But since I still very much am in love with my life, I decided to travel to one of those isolated villages and interview a local. The interview was done during the day, of course, and my findings were not as informative as I'd hoped. The natives believed that SCP-2191-3 was once the child of a sorcerer and a vampire whom both they and the pale humanoids have to feed. Obviously, that can't be the case, and I'm sure the Foundation is aware of that as well. So why haven't they done anything about it? A report from the O5 Council answers this question, but I, however, observe some odd parts of this report. The first key part is that all attempts made by the Foundation to kill the entity have failed, and these attempts resulted in both the death of civilians and Foundation members. The second is the fact that they have given it freedom to feed at will, and this part could mean that even in the event of food shortage, the Foundation will provide food for it. And the last part is that although they are not willing to sacrifice the lives of the entire civilization, they may have to, eventually. My first emphasis will be on the second observation, however. Take a look at this footage again, but this time look closely at the number of bodies inside the structure at the time. I count only 2 bodies inside the structure. So how did the tour guide leave without the girl's camera spotting him? My belief is that he was not a tourist, but a native of an isolated village in the Hoya forest, and his job was to pose as a tour guide for unsuspecting tourists and lure them to the forest as a sacrifice in place of his people. And he was able to escape through an abandoned tunnel in the walls of SCP-2191. It's either that, or he is an SCP Foundation staff member who has a similar task. My second emphasis has to do with the last point the O5 Council made in their report. Would the O5 Council and SCP Foundation actually exterminate everyone within a 660,000 square kilometer landmark just to see if it will kill SCP-2191-3? I'll have to pay close attention to this part. But while I'm at it, I'll need your help. How do you think the humanoid creatures are made? Was the tour guide actually a local native or an SCP personnel? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Like this video and subscribe to my channel because I have more content coming your way. See you soon.